So how should we approach this meeting? We want to treat everyone with respect, listen and learn from each other's comments and questions, and be part of a fair and welcoming space where everyone gets an opportunity to share. So the agenda, the welcome, we will have some opening remarks from Councillor Chris Moyse, the engagement so far, key principles of rezoning, an update to the proposal, Q&A, and what is up and coming in 2023. And for the Q&A, we will try to get to everyone's questions. So I would like for everyone to be cognizant that if you can, keep your questions to questions and not remarks. And I'd like to pass it over to Peter Zimmerman.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Peter Zimmerman. I'm a Senior Director in the Development Division at Toronto Community Housing and the lead on the revitalization of Regent Park. I'm not going to introduce all the members of the TCHC team that are on this call and who have been working so hard on this project, but there are a number of our team members here, and they will be responding to some of the questions as they come up over the course of the evening. I'd like to turn it over quickly to Jim Ritchie from Tridel. Tridel is our development partner for phases 4 and 5, and welcome Jim to make a couple of opening remarks. Hi, Jim.
Jim, you're on mute, Jim.
Well, how about that? Is that a little better?
That's great.
Okay, thanks. And thank you, Peter, for that. I did hear you, even though you just didn't hear me. I was telling you how wonderful you are. I wanted to start off by saying Tridel remains very excited to support TCH and, of course, Regent Park community in designing and constructing the final phases of the revitalization. As you know, we're working with the city to move this rezoning process forward as quickly as possible so we can start building new homes, community spaces, and certainly economic opportunities. So tonight, I'm joined by a great team from our organization, primarily through our development department, that you probably met already, either in your community or on Zoom calls like this. So they'll be supporting the presentation and responding to your questions and comments at the end of the meeting. I want to right now thank you all for joining us on this call this evening and your commitment to this very important city building process. So just remember, we're always a phone call away if you have any questions. We look forward to the discussion after this short presentation. And thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thanks very much, Jim. I'd like to turn the floor over to Chris Moyse, our new city councillor, who we've already had the good pleasure of meeting. Councillor Moyse, welcome to our meeting this evening.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. I want to also thank each and everyone here today for coming out and participating in this important meeting. I understand the value of the opportunity for community members to have their say. We'll continue to engage the community throughout the rezoning application process. I had the privilege of meeting with TCHC and Tridel last week in my office to talk about this phases 4 and 5 plan. And I do like what I've seen so far, and I hope the community does as well. The focus of the revitalization continues to be that of physical, economic, and social transformation. During my campaign, I had the privilege of speaking to many residents of Regent Park about their hopes and desire for the community. And it was very clear that they need for safe and affordable housing, different options for affordable housing, such as co-ops and rent-to-own was expressed by many people throughout the campaign. Multi-purpose community spaces was a big one, especially different prayer spaces. And I also mentioned that to Tridel and TCHC when I spoke to them last week. and business incubation. It was important as well, youth training and employment, and the larger units, 4 or 5 bedrooms. So again, they've been very present and listened to the needs of the community, and so I'm very appreciative of that. Furthermore, we also know that our city is in critical need of more rental units or a mix of housing options. The rezoning application gives us the opportunity to deliver on community priorities. It allows us to be innovative in using existing land more effectively, while also creating the infrastructure needed to support the expected population growth in the area, specifically Regent Park. I will work diligently with our community and all stakeholders to ensure that the zoning process delivers on our community priorities. Safety, of course, is very important. Desirability and livability of our community. So I am hopeful, and I hope that the community is as well as we go forward. And so I will turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moyse. It's great to have you here this evening. Let's talk about the key principles of the rezoning. So, although we're talking tonight about the second submission in the rezoning process, the key underlying principles that were the basis of the initial application remain unchanged. Next slide, please. We're doing the rezoning for a couple of key public objectives. As the councillor mentioned, affordable housing, creating new opportunities for affordable housing is at the heart of what we're trying to achieve through the rezoning. New high-quality homes, including market housing, that helps us build a diverse community and also provide some of the revenues that we need to complete the revitalization process. Previous zoning didn't have opportunities for community spaces and the amenity spaces that we know residents in the community are looking for. There wasn't a home for a new Toronto Public Library. We have members of the Toronto Public Library team here today to answer any questions that may arise about the new library site. There was limited commercial and retail opportunities, and what we heard from the community is they wanted opportunities for small scale retail, micro enterprise, and opportunities for individuals in the community to start their own businesses. So part of the rezoning is to create those spaces where those types of things can occur in the future. More open space. So in the previous design, while it was low rise, there wasn't a lot of open space available. By moving to a higher rise built form, we're able to achieve more open space, including a new civic square, which we will see as the centerpiece of the new community. Sustainable design is at the center of everything we do, thinking about how we build towards a net zero building design is a part of everything, how we bring in natural light, how we create units that have great light, air quality, and how we reduce the carbon footprint of Regent Park is a part of this overall process. Next slide, please. We're going to turn it over to Will Mendez to talk about the engagement process so far. Will, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. So since, next slide, please. Since August of 2021, we've had a series of engagement opportunities for Regent Park residents to engage in the phases 4 and 5 planning process. So we started off with meet and greets. We had dedicated meetings with community organizations. We had a few rounds of in-person and virtual surveys. We had pop-up events where we had design charrettes where people could give us feedback on designs. We had walking tours where people could come together and meet with the consulting team and TCHC and Tridel to talk about the existing conditions in the community and what they would like to see in phases 4 and 5. We had dedicated sessions with the schools and young people in the community. And we had some folks focus meetings on the Toronto Public Library, as well as a city-hosted meeting. And altogether, there's been over 1,500 touch points with community members. And people gave us candid feedback, and I think Peter summarized that very well. And it's reflected in the values and principles of phases 4 and 5. And this is a little bit of a snapshot as to like what people have said to us through the community feedback. And a priority did emerge that people would like flexible and open spaces, as well as a large centralized public space as well. And once again, the prioritization of affordable housing, two-way access for cars and pedestrian cycle connections, and locating smaller retail units throughout phases 4 and 5 were all priorities. And in the message boxes that you see on the right side of the slide, this is just a little bit of a snapshot of what people let us know. So, more access for moms with strollers and people with disabilities was something that emerged as a key trend, and retail that is varied by type and size that is affordable for local residents of Regent Park. And this is all the feedback that went into our planning, our submission for phases 4 and 5 as part of the rezoning. Next slide, please. So next, I'm gonna just walk you through where we're at. So this is our rezoning timeline, and we submitted the application earlier this year, and the city held a community-led consultation meeting, which took place on June 9th. And they talked in that meeting, the community had an opportunity to talk to the folks at the city to let them know how they felt about the application. City staff reviewed the application in more detail and the feedback from the community, and city staff have made comments that have been received by Tridel and TCHC. And we are now responding to those comments from the city and providing an updated, or we're resubmitting the application to the city for further review. So right now we're in that stage, and the next steps in this process is for the city and TCHC and Tridel to review the applications, and then it will go forward to Community Council as part of a city staff report for decision-making and approval, as well as City Council.
Thank you, Will. I will now pass it to Brian from Tridel to give an update to the proposal.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Will, for that clear breakdown of the rezoning review process. So as Will mentioned, the city has reviewed the application that we shared with this community back in April, prior to our submission, where we explained the engagement process, all the things that community members were fighting for to include in this plan. We included it and made a submission to the city, and they provided some comments back to the original application. And here's a little bit of what they've said. What I can say is that there aren't a lot of significant changes, but there are changes that required a very detailed response. And the first comment that the city made is in regards to some of the less structured open spaces that we spoke about during our community engagement process with community members. Now, if you remember, we provided several different options of how we can allocate open space throughout the phases. And one of the things we heard back very clearly from residents is to have a centralized open space, which we provided, but then to also have less formal open spaces in and around the buildings for residents to access. So when we submitted that as a part of our rezoning application, the way we did that was by changing how some roads were allocated and made them a little bit more pedestrian oriented, a lot more cycle friendly, and a lot less car friendly. And one of the comments we heard back from the city is that an important part of the rezoning, important part of the Regent Park revitalization design for city staff, and a priority that was held was to reintegrate some of the streets that were previously in Regent Park, put them back into Regent Park to promote things like safety and travel, and also safety design principles. Now, while we agree with the safety design principles and allowing access through the community, we felt that we heard very strongly from residents that there's a need for open spaces and also to remove the demand for vehicles driving through inner streets within Regent Park. So we've come up with a compromise. The first request from the city is that the street that is south of Tubman that we're proposing to run from Oak Street all the way north to Girard, that rather than having that as a meandering, pedestrian, cycle-friendly street, that we turn it into something that's a little bit more standard, something that meets the city grid to make it a more linear street. Next slide. So we've altered the design to make the streets that is going to extend from what's Tubman today, Tubman Avenue, and run north through from Oak Street north to Girard. It now looks a little bit more like your typical City of Toronto north-south street. One of the impacts of changing the street, changing this into a street, is that it's previously beneath the street. Instead of having all the traditional things that are underneath streets like sewers and water lines and sanitary lines, we had a parking garage that would go underneath the street. And because it wasn't owned by the city, we're able to put parking underneath this street that we had designed. But now with the responding to the city's request that this become a public street, we had to remove all the parking that was underneath that street, make it just services that go underneath the street. So put back in water lines and sewers and all the things that are in your typical street. We also had to shift buildings so that they more align against the street like a typical building in Toronto would. So we've made some adjustments. Now we're going to propose that these are narrower streets, that these are more pedestrian friendly than your typical Toronto street. And I think the city agrees that the focus should be on these streets, pedestrian and cycle uses, but it's going to also have vehicular traffic, unencumbered vehicular traffic as well. Next slide. So again, as a part of the proposal, there was a request for community spaces. And as a part of our design, we wanted to make very elaborate and pedestrian spaces and green spaces that would be adjacent to all the community spaces that we're proposing in the buildings. So the city again saw the importance of having community spaces next to green spaces, but there was still this desire to ensure that we're putting back the streets that were in Regent Park previously and making sure that there's still opportunity for vehicular traffic north and south through the site. So cars could travel north from Oak Street up to Girard. So we agreed with the city that that principle is important, but we wanted to find a hybrid of how we could do that while not making it a typical city street. So we worked with city staff to design a solution that would allow us to, one, not make it a city street that had sewers and water lines running underneath it, but instead would be able to have parking, so we can make the parking garages a little bit bigger. And two, had traffic calming measures that made sure that when cars drove on this street that they wouldn't be very comfortable and it would force them to slow down. So the street's going to be designed with principles that allow it to prioritize cycling and pedestrians. It will be allowed to have vehicles on them, but the vehicular traffic will be delayed or slowed through various landscaping materials. So if you go to the next slide. You'll see that we've made the boulevards really wide. So the areas where trees will be placed and green spaces and benches will take up a majority of that street. And we're providing a very narrow space for vehicles to travel north and south, travel on the street, whether it be going north or south. The priority will be for pedestrians and also the access from the buildings and green spaces. Next slide.
So Brian, I think that comes back to me. So I want to talk a little bit about what we had originally submitted in April 2022. So we can talk about some of the changes between that submission and the second submission, which is about to go into the city. So, we've talked about what were the big moves, what were the underlying principles that informed what we were doing. But the result of it is really important. What we tried to do through the rezoning, first and foremost, is increase the amount of affordable housing. So previously, the ratios for market to affordable housing were about 60% market and about 40% TCH. The new housing that's being delivered is about 60% TCH housing and 40% market. So what that resulted in is kind of a rebalancing of the numbers between the market and the affordable. And we, ended up with 1,181 TCH units and 1,792 market units. That was in our April 2022 proposal. There were also a range of heights ranging from 38 stories down to 4 stories where the library is located. Next slide, please. So small changes as we move to November 2022. Tallest building is now 39 stories, but the basic typology and organization of the buildings remains the same. The big moves that we introduced in April of 2022 remain the same. There has been a marginal increase in the projected number of TCHC units and a small increase in the number of market units, about 80, just through the reconfiguration of the buildings to address the concerns that were raised by the city and some of the added costs that were going to be incurred in the project as a result of the changes that were requested by the city. So still fairly minor changes. The basic typology remains the same. And mostly what we're trying to do here is respond to the city's feedback and move this project forward as quickly as possible so we can start delivering on the new affordable housing and the public amenities that are part of the plan. Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you for some further comments on this.
Yeah, I think you've captured a lot of them, Peter, but the only thing I would add is that we also heard that it's important for us to maintain the ratios where we're providing that a greater amount of affordable housing than market housing. And even with the increase of 80 units, we're still able to maintain that ratio. I think the amount of affordable housing to rental to market housing has shifted about 2%. And with that difference, so we're able to maintain that target. And really the purpose of increasing the number of market units, again, was to pay for the addition of those sewers and water lines that we now have to put into what's becoming a public road, as opposed to having the additional parking that was beneath that road. So maybe we can go to the next slide. So really, through the rezoning process, at the very beginning of it, it was very clear the direction we received from the community. There was a demand for new affordable renting opportunities that was very clear. There was a commitment to rezoning community priorities that were provided through the engagement process. We've heard the community, and we've understood that there are certain principles that had to be maintained throughout the rezoning, and we've also made those principles clear to the city. And we're very fortunate to hear back from the city that they also agree with the principles that the community has outlined. And we've worked together with them to ensure that none of those principles, none of the main things that were requested of us through the rezoning process have been removed, and this application have been changed in the resubmission. So as you look at the list that We heard back directly from community members. We're still providing you with the community spaces that have been requested, and we're still going to work with the community to lay out exactly how the details of how those are delivered. There's also ample opportunities for residents to engage through the delivery of micro retail. We know that that's a strong priority in the community, and as we get more into the site plan process, we'll be able to design exactly what that looks like. But at the rezoning stage, we've made accommodations for that use. The Toronto Public Library is still a consistent element within the rezoning plan, and it's still a priority and has not been changed as part of the rezoning second submission. We still feel that there's an opportunity for us to provide a central plaza, which will be a community amenity and an opportunity for a central gathering place for residents, as well as maintaining a very high standard of sustainable design throughout all the buildings that we propose in phases 4 and 5. Next slide, please.
So thanks, Brian. What I want to just talk about briefly before we get to the Q&A section of the evening. I know many people have questions that they'd like to ask. So briefly, what we're looking forward to in 2023. So there will be significant ongoing engagement related to this project. A lot of work that is happening that is sort of a separate parallel process is related to community benefits. And there's a community engagement process around what we're going to do with the community benefits fund. But on the planning and design portion of this project, we're going to be talking about everything that happens outside of the door of individual apartment units, all the non-residential space in the project. We're trying to create the framework for the library, a lot of new community amenity space, community controlled space, this whole idea of micro enterprise. And we want to talk about how we animate it, how we operate it, make sure that we get it right, to make sure that there are community gardens that are accessible, to make sure that there's a management plan that ensures that those community gardens are managed in the interests of the members of the community. How all that indoor and outdoor amenity space is going to work. How we've heard repeatedly how important it is to have community controlled space. And we're going to be working very closely over 2023 with the community, with the city councilor, and the broader community to figure out how all of that space is going to be delivered and animated and operated in the years ahead. So it's going to be a very busy year, and we're really looking forward to our ongoing work with the Regent Park community on this project. So I think we're done with the basic presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Shane to lead the Q&A portion of tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Peter. Just a few notes regarding the Q&A. Just due to the number of people in attendance, we want to limit one question per person. You can please type your questions by clicking the Q&A icon, and we will try to get through them all. For questions that we're not able to address, we will be posting an updated FAQ on our website with answers. And so please subscribe to our newsletter and stay connected. And also, just so we can get as many questions in, please actually have questions and kind of a, we don't want it to be more of a responding to statements. So kind of keep the question focused so we can respect everyone's time and get as many questions in as possible. So the format that we're going to go is we're going to have 3 questions from the Q&A, and then we'll go 3 questions from hands that are up, and we'll kind of cycle back and forth depending on how much questions we have.
Shane, before we jump into it, I just want to say that while this meeting tonight is about the phase 4 and 5 rezoning, I mean, Regent Park is a big community. It involves all of the work that has been accomplished to date and work that we're very proud of. And I'm happy that there is also in attendance representatives from Daniels, who are our partners on phases 1 through 3. So if there are any questions related to current buildings that are under construction, or anything related to phases 1 through 3. There are representatives from Daniels here who are available to answer those questions.
And I thank you for that, Peter, because the first question somewhat will go to you, and Daniels might want to touch on it. So the question is around, is there a housing plan for the 500 Dundas Street East property? That is where the current Daniels Sales Center is.
Peter, do you want to, so Fatima Saya here, Senior Manager of Social Impact from the Daniels Corporation. Apologies that my video is not on. So yeah, in fact, there are early conversations. It's still in early days in terms of planning for 500 Dundas Street East as in exploration. Hello?
Yeah, your audio is chopping up a bit. Can you restate your answer?
Yep, I definitely can. Let me try this again. Hold on one second. Better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying is that there have been so the presentation center lands are still in the early sort of design exploration phase. So there are ongoing discussions between Daniels and Toronto Community Housing on how to make the most of that particular site, including explorations of how to incorporate a spectrum of housing opportunities.
Thank you for that, Fatima. Peter, do you have any comments, or should we go on to the next question?
Again, it is early going, but we are very interested in working very closely with Daniels on a plan for that site that would potentially go well beyond the provision of a market condominium. We're looking at ways that we may be able to achieve some affordable housing outcomes on that site. It's part of a mixed development. So we're very eager about this. Daniels is very excited about the possibility of doing something other than just another condominium building. And so we're working very closely with them on that. And we'll be able to report further in 2023 on what those opportunities might look like to the broader community. So thank you, Fatima, for that.
Thank you, Peter. I will move on to the next question. It is, when will there be an in-person meeting? And this is in regards to the Zoom format. I think I could pass it on to William Mendez.
So there's a lot of information and a lot of work that has happened in the Regent Park community over the years. We are looking at having a wider community update meeting for phases 1, 2, 3, and phases 4 and 5 in the new year. Please, keep an eye out for an invitation for that. And we're hoping that that can take place in person, because it'll be a really great opportunity to come together, reflect and celebrate and recognize all the great work that has gone into Regent Park, as well as take a look at what we're planning on doing in the future. In relation to phases 4 and 5, there will be future meetings as presented as part of the next steps, and we will be having those meetings virtually and in person. It really depends on some of the unfortunate things that are taking place with regards to health policy, etc. But we are anticipating to be able to do more in-person engagement in the upcoming year. So please keep an eye out for invitations for that.
Thank you, Will. I'm just gonna go to the next question. Sorry. Yeah, so I think we will take one from the hands. Andrea, do we have record on who had their hand up?
Yes, Waleed, you have had your hand up first, so I'm going to unmute you and please ask your question.
Thank you, Andrea. I hope folks can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Very well, thanks.
go ahead.
So there's a lot of information shared today, and I have a lot of questions, and I'm hoping that we'll have another opportunity to have those questions answered at a future meeting. But one important thing that I'm hoping either Will, Peter, or Councillor Chris Moyes can clarify is there was a commitment made by the city to have another consultation session in the winter of 2022. In the presentation that was missed, so I'm hoping it's just a clerical issue. But my question is with regards to what is the commitment by Tridel for community benefits for rezoning for phases 4 and 5? So what's the actual commitment? And also some clarity if whether it will be the section 37, because that was discussed I think in our first meeting with the city, but a point was raised with regards to a potential bylaw that might need to be passed by council. So it could be community benefit charges. And a big question by the community is what's 4% of the land value of phases 4 and 5? So if you could answer that question, that'll be greatly appreciated.
So thanks, Waleed. It's Peter Zimmerman here. I think I might jump in on the question, and if Tridel has some further comments on it, I'd be happy to share the floor with them. And the question is there an increase in the dollar value? I think this is what you're asking, in the dollar value of the community benefits fund that was part of Tridel's original commitment in 2020, the $26.8 million. Is there an increase in that amount in relation to the rezoning and the increase in market housing that is a part of the rezoning? And I can tell you that there is an increase in community benefits, but those community benefits are not in the form of dollars that will be spent in the same way that the $26.8 million in the original proposal will be spent through that community benefits process in the community. The community benefits that are accrued through the rezoning give us the opportunity to achieve a couple of key public outcomes. One is increasing the amount of affordable rental housing that's a part of the plan. So we flipped the ratio between market and affordable housing as a part of the plan. It created the opportunity to build a big public square, which we hope to be the heart of the community. There's a cost associated with building that, and part of the rezoning pays for that cost. Creating the space available for the library, creating the micro retail spaces, creating the opportunities for community controlled space as a part of the plan are the community benefits that accrue through the rezoning. So while there isn't a dollar value associated with those benefits, and they're not going to be distributed in the same way that the $26.8 million fund, which is a part of this ongoing conversation with the community as to how those dollars are deployed, those benefits are real, they're on the ground, and they're going to benefit the broader community through this rezoning. So that's, our take on it, why we think this is a great deal for TCHC. We think it's a great deal for the Regent Park community, and we think it's a great deal for the city. I don't know if anybody from Tridel would like to comment further on that, or if that is a full answer to the question.
I'd say you did a pretty good job of that, Peter.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on what the 4% of the land value is for phases 4 and 5. That's very important for transparency's sake, and whether it'll be delivered under section 37 or whether that a new bylaw will apply for phases 4 and 5, so that we know as a community how to respond when it does go to community council, and some clarity on the citywide community consultation in the winter of 2023.
Well, Lead, I don't think we actually have that number. We don't know what the value of those lands are as they currently stand, as they stand for the rezoning, and what portion of those lands are going to be kept in the public sphere, in the community spaces and the TCHC buildings, and how we allocate those and how we determine how much of those site, the market component, what's the value of it. I don't think we've done that calculation.
Sorry, Peter, can I jump in?
Sure.
Just for clarity. So the assessed land value in the 4% community benefits contribution. So first, this project lands in the middle of the change in policy. So when the change was made, staff at the time when we submitted our application weren't sure which regime we're going to fall under, Section 37 or CBCs. I think it's become clear now that it's likely going to be a CBC contribution, not a Section 37. That's done away with, and we're moving forward with CBC. So I hope that's clear. It's not Section 37, CBC. Now, CBCs is assessed by 4% of the value of the lands that are being rezoned or whatever, or attributing that benefit. That assessment is not provided by the developer. It's not provided by the landowner. It's a separate assessment that's done by an independent group within the City of Toronto through their real estate department. Regardless of what deal TCHC has with Tridel and whatever the land value TCHC pays or receives from Tridel, that has nothing to do with the assessment of the 4% that's contributed to the CBC. It's 100% determined independently by the City of Toronto, and that value is not disputable. It's told to the owner, and the owner will make a contribution based on the amount that the real estate department decides. But no one at this table knows what that number is. It's solely held within the real estate department at the City of Toronto.
Thank you for that, Brian. We will jump into the next question for the live Q&A. Andrew, who do we have next in queue?
Ines, I'm going to allow you to talk. Please ask your question. I think you have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My question is regarding about in phase 4 and 5, the space for the multi-purpose. As you guys are aware that when they build community center and the athletic ground, it's supposed to be priority for members of this community. We don't have priority for those spaces. And this other space in phase 4 and 5, I hope you guys don't give access to the city. Because at the end, the city does not give a care about the people in this community of having access. We have to really fight to get access when we need it. It all comes to money because they're getting money from people from outside to get access to those spaces. So it is very important for us if at least my way of thinking, the way TCHC has when they rent their spaces in the Toronto housing building, because at the end, that money that it gets when we pay for those spaces, that money is used again for the tenants in the community. And I think that would be a better way instead of giving it to the city. I hope you guys do not give it to the city, please, 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 because we're already struggling with that. Thank you. I have more questions, but that's enough from me.
Thanks, Inez. I think that's a really important point that you raised, and thank you for that. So in the presentation earlier, I was talking a bit about what the next 12 months looks like. And so one of the key issues that we want to address is the very concern that you raised here tonight. So the question is, how do we build, how do we animate, how do we operate those new spaces that we're going to be building as a part of the revitalization of phases 4 and 5 in the interests of the community? And we've heard that criticism. We understand it. Now our objective is to work with you and others in the community to make sure that the spaces that we're building are going to be owned and operated in the community interest, and that there is, we've heard it time and time again, the importance of community controlled space. And we're committed to working with the community and working towards the delivery of those spaces, which can be controlled by the local community, whether they're retail spaces or community spaces, or potentially even places where we can have places of worship. Jim, I'm not sure if you were going to jump in or you're going to say something on this point as well.
No, I'm aligned with exactly what you're saying.
Thanks.
We're all committed in that regard.
Thank you for that, Peter. Andrew, we can go one more from the live Q&A, then we'll go back to the typed chats and the typed questions in the chat.
Okay. Ishmael, I'm going to allow you to talk. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so my question is, before I ask my question, there was an opportunity for the Regent Park Neighborhood Association to organize a community conversation around different perspectives around rezoning. I know that we've sent invitations to all the parties, and as well as we've been mentioning this in the social development plan meetings. So it's become quite disappointing to hear that none of the partners are willing to have a community-led conversation about this. So I just wanted to express my disappointment around each partner, be it TCHC, Tridel, and Daniels, not being able to participate in a community-led conversation about this. So I just want to say that first. Second, I want to ask this question, and this question is around if, let's say, rezoning were not to happen, what are the losses in terms of amenities, in terms of opportunities that we would get? So the question is, what does rezoning get us? And if we were not to rezone, what would we lose?
Thanks. Don't want to dominate the responses to the questions, but maybe I can jump in on it. So, Ishmael, one of the things that was pretty clear when we were looking at the existing plans, the existing zoning, there were no plans, the existing zoning for phases 4 and 5, is that it was a placeholder. It was a placeholder that anticipated planning for what the future might be at a future date. So what we had previously was a set of zoning envelopes with very limited opportunities for density on the site. So in our need to complete the replacement of all 2,083 rental units that were on the footprint of Regent Park at the beginning of the revitalization process, we would have used up most of the density that would have been available for public purposes in phases 4 and 5. And the rest of it would have needed to go to market housing in order to help defray the costs of the revitalization. In that earlier plan, or that earlier zoning, there were no provisions for community space. There was no provision for a library. There were no provisions for a public square. There were no provisions for community gardens. All of that is possible only through the rezoning. And that was the driving force behind our decision to move forward on the rezoning and work with the community to figure out what were those important elements that needed to be in the plan. And as we move forward in the rezoning, so all of those items that are in the plan are being supported by the additional heights and the additional density, the smaller number of additional market units. All of that is supporting those community spaces, the library space, all of those things that are going to really animate the community would not have been possible without the rezoning.
Thank you for that response, Peter. So next I will go to the typed in questions. And this one is around if we can provide an update on the placement and the timeline for the new library.
Peter, were you gonna?
I guess I can speak to that, Mo, because it's more of
Yeah.
a planning question.
Yeah,
than
go ahead, Brian.
a
Sounds
one
good.
question. Yeah, so for the placement of a library, we're still showing the library being placed within the center of the revitalization for phases 4 and 5, with a frontage on Girard and also a frontage onto what we're calling a new community plaza that will be a central space for the community to gather and also do commerce. It's also where we're proposing to do our micro retail. So the location is still the same. In terms of timing, it's really dependent upon the rezoning and the timing for the rezoning. We're hoping that this will happen as quickly as possible. I know from our hearing from the Toronto Public Library that the funding is being made available. So it's not a funding delay. It's just a process delay and making sure that we've developed the proper services and roads to access the library. And we're hoping that will be it's going to be as soon as possible. Is it the next 2 years? No, definitely not within the next 2 years. But is it within the next 5 or 7? I think that's probably the timeline that we're working with in terms of having a new library in place, or having construction start on a new library.
Thank you for that response, Brian. I think the next question, we have a few questions in the chat about affordable rental. I don't know if you can speak to some of the higher level and a bit of the details into what that's going to look like in the near future.
So maybe it's back to me again, Shane. Yeah, this is really a critical part of the plan. And so one of the important outcomes of the rezoning application is that we've made an opportunity for over 500 units of new affordable rental housing. So in addition to the work that we're going to carry on with the community in 2023, the other key activity that we're going to be working on is building the financial plan that's going to support that. So that will involve support from the City of Toronto, hopefully the province of Ontario, and the federal government through Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation in the form of grants and loans that are going to help us drive down the cost of the delivery and the rents on those 500 plus units of new affordable rental housing, which we're making possible through the rezoning. What it's going to look like, how it's going to get rolled out, that's all going to get determined in the next year. Where we'll probably end up being in terms of rents, they'll be compliant with programs that are established by CMHC and the city. So rent levels that are about 80% of the average market rent for 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms, 4 bedroom units in the city. So that's kind of like where we're going next year, working on the funding model, continuing the conversation with the community around this aspect of the project, and making sure that we have the funding in place. So as we start rolling out the buildings, we're able to deliver on the promise of the affordable rental housing as a part of the development. Thanks.
Thank you again for that response, Peter. And then the next question, before we go to respondents that have their hands up, is I see in the chat there's a question around parks. Can we touch on the parks and green space that have become available as a part of the rezoning?
I'm happy to speak to that. So what we've done through the rezoning application And again, something that is now possible because of the rezoning that wouldn't be possible beforehand, as we've provided through the site, running east and west through the middle of the site, what we're calling a green spine. Essentially, it's a connection of green spaces between buildings that allows us to have different programs and uses. One thing we heard very strongly when we first started engagement was the demand for seniors fitness and seniors fitness spaces. This green spine will have room for those types of uses. There's also an opportunity for community gardening. We've heard that there's a demand for other recreational facilities like basketball courts and spaces for kids to have less formal activities and programming that isn't required, that doesn't require a cricket pitch or a soccer field being rented out. So the green spine provides that type of access to residents, and we're hoping also has the opportunity to be programmed by residents. So we're creating the facilities and the spaces for the community to have input into how they want to use these green spaces. They haven't been programmed yet. The rezoning doesn't speak to the specific users or who's going to be using a space. It just tries to provide opportunities for the uses. So the uses are there and made available. And we're going to be able to work with the community to program those spaces together. And then we're also proposing a large central plaza, which isn't necessarily going to be a lawn like the big park, but will provide landscaped areas for businesses to spill out into that space and do commerce, and for community events to be held there, and for interactions to naturally flow from the buildings into that central space and then south into the park if needed. And we're working with our colleagues at the city to ensure that those spaces are also, they have the opportunity to be programmed by community. So that's really our plan for green spaces, is to make sure that there's an abundance of them through the middle of the site, and also that they're accessible for programming by residents.
So I think here this slide was to show some of the pieces that Brian was talking about. But I do want to pass it on. Andrea, do we have any hands up for the Q&A?
We do. Next question is to Waleed. Waleed, I'm going to allow you to talk. You can unmute yourself, please.
Thank you so much. My question relates to the affordable housing and the definition of affordable housing. Peter, you said earlier that it was 80% of market. Is it market rent? I know the city of Toronto right now is fighting an appeal to the definition of affordable housing, which is some developers would like to move to a market-based model, not an income-based model. So I just want more clarity on what policies specifically will apply to the housing that's been built, specifically deeply affordable housing, rent geared to income. So just more clarity on that.
Thanks, Waleed. It's a really important point. And one important point to make is that, Toronto Community Housing we are a corporation that is owned by the City of Toronto. We take our direction from the City of Toronto. We will work with the definitions of affordable housing that are established by the city. So while there may be some voices in the market housing community that are trying to adjust the definition of affordable, we will comply with whatever definitions are established by the city, and importantly by Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation for affordable. So right now, those definitions stand at 80% of the average market rent for comparable units in the city of Toronto. We would like to go deeper. We'd like to have greater affordability. I'm really pleased that the counselor is on this call. A lot of these decisions that will need to be made will be through the efforts of city council to push the province, to push the federal government to help us achieve as deep affordability as we can on those 500 units. There will be 633 new rent geared to income housing units, fulfilling our obligation to replace all 2,083 units that were on the footprint of Regent Park. We would like to go beyond that. We would like to have more RGI housing. We would like to have deeper affordability, but all of that is contingent on the funding support that we get from the city, the province, and the federal government. So we're going to be working very hard on that, and we're going to need the support of the community as we try to move that question forward in the next year or so.
Thank you for that, Peter. Andrea, who do we have next in the queue for question?
Matthias?
Hi there. Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. First, before I ask my question, I'm just going to say that, and I'm saying this in regards to the question that Ines asked, I really feel like both the answer to her question and to some of the other questions are incredibly vague and unspecific, and I don't believe they're providing sufficient answers. I know that some of these questions are hard to answer at the time, given the stage of planning we're in, but I really hope that in the near future, much more significant detail can be provided in future meetings. Having said that, my question is related to a lot of the green spaces that we have. So as it stands with many of the, I live at 260 Sackville, which is a condominium building. When I was a youngster, I used to also live on Sackville, but in a TCHC building. And something that I noticed from a very young age, and I continue to see, is the way a lot of that green space was used is for, specifically in front of some of these TCHC buildings, is grass that gets cut by many, I guess, employees of TCHC, and is very not conducive to a healthy ecology in the community, and is also not good for our storm sewer system and such, as it creates large amounts of runoff. I'd like to know if there are any ideas or plans in place as to how to reduce the amount of just grass we plant in a lot of these spaces, even along Sackville, right outside of my building. Every single year, they cordon it off and put more seed and try and regrow the grass, and then come September, they take away the the barriers made with, generally speaking, like with caution tape and such. And I see the soil erosion that continues to happen. I see when it rains that a lot of those places with the soil erosion and compacted soil doesn't seem to absorb water very well. And I wonder if we can approach this in a much more sustainable way through making things like rain gardens and types of planters and such that require significantly less regular maintenance, because I believe that regular maintenance, which will likely fall on the hands of TCHC or city coffers, is just in the long term not a sustainable approach, and like I said, not healthy for the ecology. So I'd like to know if there's actually some real thought being put into that, because this is a problem on every single TCHC property around the city. This is not exclusive to Regent Park, but I'd really like to see that discussed or potentially a very concrete plan put forward about that.
Thank you for your question, Matthias.
So with regards to designing and community engagement involved in designing some of the outdoor spaces or green spaces, that happens a little later on after the rezoning has taken place and has been completed, and we get into more detailed designs for the specific sites within the rezoned phases 4 and 5. We definitely look forward to engaging with the community on that, and we do have a lot of expertise within the project team, and there's a lot of expertise within the community and great ideas that can come together at the appropriate time to design those more specific spaces and take a look at what has worked well and what hasn't, just reviewing, as mentioned, the use of those spaces and what it looks like, 5 or 6 years after it's been constructed, and how people actually use the spaces. And we can utilize all of that information to inform what takes place for the future. So definitely there will be more engagement on that, and much more work, and very important work, to design those spaces.
I would just add to that, Matthias, I really appreciate that question, and I think it's something we've observed and we've heard, and what we've heard throughout the engagement process is that people want to have spaces that make sense. So the community garden thing is huge. The community gardens that exist now are in high demand. So we need more community garden space. We need other types of landscape if we're gonna achieve our environmental objectives. And that's part of that ongoing process as we work our way through it. We've heard this loud and clear. Now our challenge is going to be to work with the community to create that plan, that aspect of the plan, and to execute it. So those types of words are really encouraging to hear. And I thank you for the question.
Thank you for the response, Peter. Andrea, was that 3, or are we going back to the?
No, I think
question
we
in the
still
chat?
have a couple of more questions from live. Stephanie, you're next. I'm going to allow you to talk if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
Yeah, I'm a resident in the community, and I just want to encourage Chris Moyse and all community members who have questions and concerns about the rezoning to join community-led discussions about it, including one that's coming up this Wednesday by RPNA that Ishmael mentioned. Because I think, the applicant-led discussions are really from the perspective of TCHC and Tridel as the developers, and from their revenue perspectives. But I think it's being framed in a way that is just, the narrative is kind of controlled a little bit. And I think it obscures the fact that there are lots of concerns and questions within the community, and maybe a different take on this rezoning. And seeing it really as a massive intensification of the last 2 phases of the rezoning, way beyond what's allowed in the secondary plan, and really in a way that will fundamentally change the character of the neighborhood. I mean, putting skyscrapers and a wall of towers along the north end of the street will really, overwhelm the neighborhood and just change the character. And it's going to lead to really huge delays. And we're already facing big delays, and that has a big impact. I mean, for people who live on the edge of the development, and especially for people who are living in the old housing. It's practically empty buildings, posing a security concern to them. They're becoming increasingly derelict. Windows are papered over and boarded over and have sheets hanging from the windows. People are living in these units and in this housing, and it's really, it's just kind of a shameful set of conditions for them. And there are families that are living underhoused, waiting for these new units to come online. And most of the family-sized units have been pushed off to the final phase. So it's families who are being most negatively impacted by that. And, I think there are just a whole host of issues that people have with this. and lots of concerns that, you know, we really haven't discussed yet as a community. And I think a lot of these issues are just being glossed over for this sort of positive narrative about, oh, we're going to bring more community space. But I think in some ways, and some of the comments tonight have pointed to this. It's, you know, I don't think TCHC and Tridel and the city really appreciate what's going on in this community, in that there's all this new community space, but community members can't get access to it, can't get access to the community center, can't get access to the athletic field or the aquatic center. Our park is underserved. We can't get access to the bake oven or the greenhouse. I mean, I think there are a lot of issues right now that go to really kind of doing an audit at where we're at with this revitalization, which has never happened. There's been no reporting on the finances, the outcomes, the impacts of this, and yet these rezonings keep getting pushed through. And, you know, if not for the rezoning in 2014, this would almost be finished by now. And we wouldn't have hundreds of units of affordable housing sitting empty, but still getting paid for by the city. You know, there could be 500 families living in that old housing, living in those units right now. And it's now going to be years and years of delays if this rezoning gets pushed through. So I just think, you know, Chris, in particular, I think it would be really helpful if you join the community-led discussions to hear more about this. And if all community members did too, so we can get organized. Thanks.
Just want to make a few comments here. You know, I'm coming to this with some fresh eyes, and you know, speaking to the community over the last 6 months while canvassing during the election. You know, I did get an earful as to what they're looking for in the space, and I think I alluded to that, you know, during my opening remarks. But as it stands now, though, in regards to phases 4 and 5, as the building is up now, just remind people that, you know, the people from Swansea Muse are in that space, right? And I have encouraged, you know, our city staff to temporarily put people, you know, on the streets, you know, for the winter into some of the empty spaces in Regent Park. So yes, there may be paper over the windows, but, you know, we're doing our best with limited resources to try and house people temporarily, rather than being, you know, in the parks or in the streets or in alleyways over the winter months. And we know what happens when, you know, the cold weather comes, right? People freeze to death. And, you know, in a first world country like Canada, that should not happen. And people know too that, you know, we have a housing crisis in this, not only in this city, but really in this entire province. And Bill 23 just went through today, and I've been very vocal about it. It takes away a lot of our powers of the city when it comes to even building more deep affordable housing that was alluded to earlier. It handcuffs us to actually provide more housing, to build sewage and all the infrastructure that we need. So again, that's something that, you know, we have to look at the city to address going forward. As you may know, there's an $850 million budget shortfall that we're trying to figure out what to do going forward. But also too, you know, the community have asked for prayer spaces, right? Not only one, but I think 3 in total of different community groups want prayer spaces in Regent Park. And, you know, I have met with Tridel and TCHC to actually, you know, implore them to make sure those spaces are available, that it's put in the plans, right? And again, you know, in regards to modular shops for people, you know, it's community focused. You know, we've all been paying attention. You know, Tridel's actually, you know, been, I feel, reasonable. I pushed them a lot in the last few weeks, and they've reluctantly, you know, embraced some of the things, the feedback I've given them. So it's not to say that, you know, these things are done in silos and community is not, input is not heard or listened to, because, you know, using my lens, I think it has been, you know, and I do want this project to to proceed sooner rather than later, it's been delayed several times already. So I rather not say delayed any further, but those are my comments for now.
Thank you for that response, Councillor. And we will go to the text questions. And this one will be about the construction timelines and if there has been any change as a result of the rezoning.
I'll take that one. So with the rezoning, there's definitely been a change to construction timelines without the rezoning. We had to go back and get additional approvals through the city process. We also took the time to engage residents on what they wanted to see happen in phases 4 and 5 so that it would reach its full potential. And so there's definitely that added time in that process. But what we have done since engaging residents is we've expedited the rezoning review in the production of the rezoning documents. We've submitted the rezoning application to the city within record time after completing the consultation process with the community. And what we also have now is an advocate, through TCHC, internally working with city staff to push the approvals process. And we've also received firm direction from Councillor Chris Moyse that he's going to work on his end to push city staff to review applications faster than typically processed because of the priority of this social housing project and affordable housing project. So we have a delay of more than a year for the construction of townhouses and new buildings, but we would not be able to have the additional housing units. We've increased from 633 units to over 1,000 units of affordable housing. That is a result of the rezoning, and we heard very clearly, I believe, from community during our time in engaging them for the rezoning process, that there was a very strong demand for additional housing in this project. And that comes at the cost of not starting immediately after the last building being put up. And the process and the time to hear from residents what's needed and what was wanted as a part of this new partnership necessitated that we take some time to review that. But in terms of how much time has been lost or delayed, it's difficult to put a specific number on that because, as we said, there were demands that were met, that were asked, requested through the community engagement process that only a rezoning would be able to facilitate.
Thank you for that, Brian. I just want to give everyone a heads up that we have 8 more minutes left in the meeting. We will do one more from the text chat and then one more live. Hopefully we can squeeze them in and then we'll wrap it up. So the next question is about the library. Is there going to be opportunities for Indigenous themes or engagements for the new library?
Thank you, Shane, and thank you for that question. It's Mo from Toronto Public Library speaking. Yeah, absolutely. We look at our communities as we do our new or even renovations and actually engage the communities, including the Indigenous communities, because we're very much committed to Indigenous placemaking and placekeeping. So we will look at every opportunity to indigenize the library here, as we have with some of our other recent builds. And again, as a part of our community engagement process, once we get going on the design, we will definitely be engaging with the Regent Park community, including the Indigenous communities, to see what we can do with respect to Indigenous placemaking and placekeeping. So absolutely, we'd be very happy to do that.
Thank you, Mo. And Andrea, let's go to the last question for the person that has their hands up.
Magdalena, your hand is up, and I just allowed you to talk. If you can just unmute. Thank you. Go ahead. You're unmuted, but we can't really hear you.
I think your connection, Magdalena, we're unable to hear you.
Shane, why don't we go to the next person in line and come back to Magdalena?
Okay,
Yeah.
Christina, go ahead.
Hi there. I was just wondering if you could please share an updated version of the shadow survey to show the impact of the changes in the heights in the buildings on the residents that live north of Gerrard.
Yeah, we can certainly make that available. Christina, thanks for the question.
Okay, where would I find that?
It will be on the website with the second submission.
Okay. Thank you.
And Andrea, do we have anything from Magdalena? If we can probably try and squeeze her in. If not, then we can we go
No,
to
she dropped off. I don't see her, so I'm not sure. Maybe she had a connection issue. Sorry.
Oh, okay. What, can you go to the last slide where we can give some more additional information? Or we do have a few minutes. How much hands do we have left? If we can probably squeeze one more in.
I see Magdalena's back. If you can unmute, maybe try again to ask your question, Magdalena.
Hello?
There you go. We can hear you. Go ahead.
When will the package for relocation be sent to the tenants?
Yeah. So for the relocation package, it depends on where you are, where you're currently located. If you are in phase 4, we will be reaching out to you sometime this week to connect with you to make note of the relocation package coming early next year, January or February 2023. So Magdalena, I can connect with you offline to answer any more relocation questions that you might have. And thank you for that. And with that, I thank everyone for attending and for the lively discussion. For more information, please go to our website at the www.rp415.ca. The questions that we were unable to answer will be addressed through the updated FAQ posted on this website after the meeting, and recording of this presentation, as well as documents for the second resubmission, as also Peter made note of the shadow survey, will be uploaded onto the website and also on the city's website. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at talkregentpark@torontohousing.ca, and also sign up for our newsletter. And with that, I would like to bring this meeting to a close. Thank you and have a good evening, everyone.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our social media platforms. For more information, check out our website.